Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we take you on an insightful look at the most current trends and key players in the tech industry. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and I'm excited to engage in a deep dive conversation today with a luminary of the marketing tech world. His name is Scott Brinker, and he's widely known as the Godfather of Martech. And Scott currently serves as the Vice President of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, where he steers the company's platform strategy and leads business programs for its global technology partner ecosystem. And today we're going to be exploring the fascinating evolution of marketing technology, discuss everything from the rise of no-code tools to the increasing incorporation of AI into marketing, especially with Gen AI platforms such as ChatGPT. But aside from that, I think it's also important that we touch on the importance of platform ecosystems, how they're enabling businesses to scale and adapt in an ever-changing marketplace, and ultimately why integrating different tech solutions into a unified platform ecosystem. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Boston, where Scott Brinker, Godfather of Martech, is waiting to talk with us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Scott. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm Scott Brinker. I am the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot. So I work with all the companies that build integrations to HubSpot or that HubSpot integrates with, because it's a big ecosystem world out there in MarTech and sales tech.
Fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I read that you're known as the Godfather of Martech, which sounds incredibly cool. Was it a little bit like Godfather 3 and that line where he says, when I think I'm out, they pull me back in?
Yes. Every morning I wake up and there's new MarTech announcements that are pulling me in.
Well, with all that in mind, can I ask you to share your perspective on the evolution of MarTech over the past decade? Because I would imagine you've seen so many big changes.
Yeah, it's been a really fascinating field. Everybody knows marketing has changed tremendously over the past decade, 2 decades. What's challenging for us sometimes is to be able to quantify that. Well, exactly by how much has it changed? A ton. But one way we could actually look at that and have a quantitative measure is if you're familiar with that marketing technology landscape. It's like a graphic that over the years has mapped out the originally dozens, then hundreds, and then, oh my goodness, thousands, different MarTech solutions. You look at the first version of that published in 2011, and there were about 150 different companies on the map in different categories, which at the time even seemed like a huge number, like, oh my goodness, 150 different marketing technologies. How will we ever keep track of them all? And then year over year, it just grew. I mean, it was growing exponentially for a while, so that the recent one published earlier this year had over 11,000 solutions, so I don't know, I don't have the calculator handy on this, but I think we're looking at something like, a 6,000% growth, over a decade. So I would say that's one way of thinking about just how much marketing and MarTech has changed in this past decade.
Wow, it's just breathtaking, the speed of technological change. With what happened with generative AI this year, the speed that ramped up. And of course, there's also almost realization that technology, or the pace of technology, won't move this slow again. So it's going to keep ramping up. And one of your key roles at HubSpot is shaping the company's platform strategy and also leading its global technology partner ecosystem. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that entails and also how it impacts HubSpot's customers who may or may not be listening, of course?
Excellent. Well, I think this is one of the things we just realize in the tech world is it is a highly heterogeneous tech environment. I mean, to your point, even here with generative AI, we're just seeing hundreds of companies, new startups, new ideas. The pace is just incredible. And, it's not like it's just in one category. It's in various different kinds of marketing, whether what we're doing with advertising or how we're engaging with social. The social landscape keeps changing, right? Even a shout out to, was it no longer Twitter, X? But there's new social networks, there's new capabilities for it. We've got this like Meta Threads thing, that all of a sudden is like a new platform. And so there's all these changes that keep happening. There are changes within different industries or specialties of, how they engage with customers. You have different regions throughout the world where they might have, different, either like standards or cultural ways in which they want to engage with. And so all these things help feed in to why there's this just incredible explosion of all these different technologies. I think you kind of have two choices as a company. You can either be like, okay, it's going to be us and, we don't care about anyone else. We're just going to do our own thing and, not worry about anything else that's out there, which again, from years ago, that's how a lot of large software companies thought. They're like, okay, we're just building our thing and what we do, and we're just going to win the market with our thing. But what's happened is because there are now so many of these different technologies and they're constantly coming up, that increasingly the way that companies win isn't just by shipping their own software and sort of having blinders, to whatever else is happening in that landscape. They win by actively embracing the idea that there's a multitude of other software companies doing all these incredible innovations. And instead of always looking at those as competitors, actually looking at many of them as complementers. How can we work with them to integrate their ideas, their capabilities into our platform so that customers have a choice of many different capabilities they can bring in, and that when they do bring in multiple things, the customer doesn't have to worry about how do I get X to work with Y to work with Z, that the software companies themselves actually do the hard work behind the scenes to make that integration happen. So that's my focus on technology partnerships.
100% with you. And I would say outside of that, I would say there's a huge expectation for businesses and brands to evolve and adapt and scale at a tremendous speed too. And many businesses as a result are keen to scale up in today's marketplace and utilize these various tools to do so. So in your view, how important is it for businesses not to restrict themselves to tools that might have a competitive overlap, and why?
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, one of the things about just having so many different technology solutions in the market and everybody's evolving very quickly. It's almost impossible to have zero competitive overlap. There's like a great example of this, HubSpot. We have a set of technologies built into our platform to be able, to manage advertising with things like, Google and Meta. Which is great particularly for a lot of our customers who are starting out. That's perhaps the only advertising they actually need to leverage initially. And so they can do that right in HubSpot and they're good to go. But then as you get companies that, are larger or they have more diverse strategies for how they manage advertising as part of their business, for them to be able to say like, okay, well, we actually want more sophisticated. We want to be able to get access to more and more networks. That for them to be able to look at, say, in the ad tech space, they call them demand side platforms, a DSP, like a Stack Adapt that supports, dozens and dozens of different niche networks to be able to say, oh, well, let's actually go ahead and get Stack Adapt because then we'll be able to do these other networks. Perhaps we'll be able to plug things into like how we want to manage advertising on like CTV or things like that. But to have Stack Adapt actually integrate deeply with HubSpot. And now the customers, they get this incredible combination of both of these things working together. Now, HubSpot does advertising, Stack Adapt does advertising. So you can say, well, yeah, at some level, there's some competitive overlap there. But for the actual use cases where people would want to use Stack Adapt with HubSpot, it's a highly complementary combination.
And in terms of achieving that utopia, an organized tech stack, what role does the freedom to choose the best tools for a specific business play? And how does this impact the end result, would you say?
Well, yeah, ironically, even though I chart the thousands and thousands of different marketing technology solutions out there, my advice to marketers is essentially the Occam's razor of tech stacks, which, other things being equal, the simplest stack is best. So if you have the ability to do the things that you need to do with a smaller number of tools, not only is that usually simpler to do, it's also more economic, to do that as well too. I think where the line is when you have specific capabilities you want for your business to have the freedom to then select from a much wider market of other more specialized tools that you want to enhance your particular platform with. That should basically give you the best of both worlds, so that, we have as much tech stack as we need to accomplish what we want, but we don't, have to go beyond what we actually need, and keep ourselves focused on the marketing more than the tech.
100% with you there. And as we said at the very beginning, Martech seems to have grown significantly throughout the years. So I'm curious, how are businesses incorporating this trend into their strategies? And ultimately, are there any big challenges that they face when it comes to things like integration and creating an effective platform ecosystem? Because I think everyone's on this same journey, and it sounds simple on the surface, but when you look under the hood, things quickly get complicated, don't they?
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons, and again, I'm biased because I spend all day, every day thinking about this particular issue, but I highly recommend that marketers consider the ecosystem and the integrations of a product as one of the primary criteria in making their purchasing decisions. It has to do what you want it to do. You have to like the user experience. It has to fit within the budget that, you believe you're going to be able to get your ROI from. All those criteria are important too. But I think historically, marketers haven't always thought about and what about the integration component of this? Because, it was, years ago, right? Integration was not like a hot topic in, marketing. But I think today it really does matter. If you choose products that integrate well with each other, boy, it just saves you not only a ton of headaches, but it actually opens up more of the possibilities for the kinds of marketing you can do. And even the simplest way of looking at that, frankly, is just even getting the data connected together. Because, the great thing there's a couple of things I have always loved about digital marketing. One is how malleable it is, right? Bits are easier to change than atoms, and so I think digital marketing over the past couple decades has really ushered into this incredible just spirit of experimentation and testing, to have people try and identify what works and, all right, let's try this other variation and move on. And just the digital world lets you do that, which is so powerful. But the second thing that's really related to that is the digital world is just so measurable. Now, not everything is measured, but a lot is measured, a lot more than, in the marketing world before, our digital age. But if you've got multiple tools and multiple different channels or tactics, programs, campaigns, initiatives that you're running in marketing, in order to really be able to manage that well, you need to get that performance data coming into a common platform so that you actually have the ability to do some apples to apples comparison. You can actually see okay, well, where is the customer journey? If we get things that, get people who come in at this particular touch point, how does that affect their conversion rate in our funnel over time? What's their lifetime value? If you can get that end-to-end view by getting the data from all these different touch points into a single system, yeah, that just makes it so much easier for you to, again, get out of the business of worrying about the tech and being more in the business of okay, what are the actual marketing campaigns and programs that work for us?
And as an ex-IT guy, I would say one of the things that really interests me is how that relationship between IT and marketing has evolved over the years, and also the rise of no-code features in Martech products. So are there any insights you can share around that, and how some of these features are actually empowering marketers to build digital experiences and process automations, but without relying on those busy IT staff and that long line of projects that seems to take too long to get over the line?
Yeah, the history of IT and marketing is fascinating. I got into this, early on. If anyone was actually watching me here, they'd see the gray hairs. So yeah, and the reality is that when the whole web explosion happened and digital marketing came into being, IT and marketing were really on just opposite ends of the career spectrum. They just They spoke different languages, their priorities were different. Sometimes, there was a lot of friction, and sometimes people, framed it as like, oh, well, these IT people don't like marketing, or marketing doesn't like IT. I don't think it was actually a liking or not liking thing. It's like they just didn't actually understand each other, and it really has taken us, a decade, 2 decades for both IT to get a deeper appreciation, understanding of like, oh, okay, what's actually happening? I mean, these are systems, this is data, this is our world of technology that we understand, but how is it fitting into the business of what marketing is running? I think IT has, just become so much more savvy on understanding that, and vice versa. Marketers who, again, originally weren't operations, tech folks, have now really come to appreciate that, like, having a good marketing operations person, inside the marketing team who can really serve as, both the liaison between marketing and IT, but can also, inside marketing, provide that administrative capabilities with these systems, really help empower marketers to do their best work with these technologies. And so I think as that role of marketing operations, of marketing tech management has grown up in marketing, marketing's become a lot more savvy about that too. And so I think if you look at it today, again, it's a distribution curve from, across different companies. But I think actually in a lot of companies, you see marketing and IT very well collaborating together. And one of the things on the no code that's opened up is IT has so many things that they're doing, and there's a ton of things that they've realized, oh, this request for this report or this request for this data, or someone wanted to automate this particular workflow. There's a ton of things that years ago, only IT was qualified to be able to do because there's a very technical process to make it happen. But the rise of these no-code tools have allowed a lot more of this sort of low-end use cases to be handled by the marketing operations people or the power users. And that many of these no-code platforms, IT still has the ability to set the guardrails. So, okay, well, here's the space that you can, do this in. Here's the data that you can have access to. We have the ability to audit this stuff and monitor it to make sure, things aren't going off the rails. But that's been incredibly empowering because now IT gets to focus on, the more advanced opportunities and challenges they want to pursue. And a lot of marketers in their sort of day-to-day work have the ability to self-service more and more of their needs. So they can keep rolling as well, too.
Love that. I'm curious, if we were to dig a little bit deeper there, from everything that you've seen in the industry now, do you have any examples or use cases or case studies around how no-code features have enabled marketers to maybe react faster to rapid industry changes? Is there anything that you've seen out there that's particularly caught your attention?
Well, the whole space of marketing automation is in that. And a lot of what kind of some of the first no code, in marketing was about. It's that, if we look at the customer journey, what we see is this myriad of touch points. People might have visited the website here. They might have come in, participating in an event, or they might have signed up for an event. Participating in an event is something else. Staying all the way through to the end of the event, is another thing. Coming back to the website within a particular time period. Okay, did, like a salesperson reach out to them? You get all these different data of all these different touch points. And at scale, right, this is happening, across hundreds, depending on the size of your organization, thousands of, people a given month. You do not want to have people individually trying to manually okay, let me pay attention. This one came here. All right, let me do this thing here. So much of it lends itself to setting up some of these patterns that can just be automated. And at the end of the day, these are kind of really lightweight no-code workflows. It's saying if there's this trigger, someone, signed up for an event, and they visited the website, more than 3 times before. Okay, they're probably a hot prospect. So now we want to change the setting, on where they are, perhaps in a deal stage pipeline. We might want to send a notification to their, assigned sales rep, through Slack. And we might want to set a follow-up, for like 2 weeks. Just these sorts of things to say like, oh yeah, we've got a program idea, or we've got a campaign idea that's going to have some of that programmatic logic to it. And to be able to do that as a marketer, not as a software programmer, but if you're an old school software programmer, you're looking at this and you're like, this is kind of a little bit of software programming, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And we've already mentioned Gen AI once. I suppose it's the law in any tech podcast or tech article. We might got to mention it. But with the emergence of AI platforms, Gen AI and ChatGPT, of course, how do you see this technology further incorporating into the mainstream of marketing? And what opportunities and challenges do these new platforms present, do you think? Because I think in 8 months, we've seen so much change. And I predict that, I think we can both safely predict these changes will ramp up speed even further into 2024. But what do you see here?
Yeah, wow. All right, so there's 3 things I'll share that are on the top of my mind about this. So of course, there's the one that in marketing we've seen a lot of activity with, which is the idea of using Gen AI to help create content. And it doesn't. In most cases here, people have realized, okay, it's not that we're going to turn over to Gen AI to just create everything from scratch and we're just going to post it as is and, get rid of all their content marketers. People have realized, no, this is great tools to accelerate the process of creating, but to really do it in a quality way, you still very much need the human acting as, the editor and the synthesizer and these different components. So there's a ton happening with that. But the 2 other things that I get really excited about, one is we're seeing these AI assistants or sometimes co-pilots. Here at HubSpot, we have this ChatSpot functionality that we've come out with that actually become a way for users to interact with their software using natural language instead of always having to let me go to this menu and I click this thing and then I go down to this other screen and I configure this stuff and I get this drop down and then I click this next button here. I mean, it's wonderful how many things our software technologies these days can do in marketing. Just so many of these tools have just such a rich set of capabilities. But kind of the flip side of that is, the span of all the things they can do is often just trying to even learn all of the things that you can do is no small task. And so the cool thing about using these generative AI interfaces is now instead of, the marketer having to learn the software, in many cases, they can basically say, here's what I want. I want a report that's going to tell me X, Y, and Z. And they don't even have to think about the menus I go through to configure such a report. They just give their requests. The Gen AI figures out how to map that into executing it on the software itself. And voila, here you are. Here's your magical report. Oh, could you send me an email version of that every couple of weeks? Sure, I can schedule that. No problem. I mean, this stuff, it's magical. It's almost science fiction, but this is actually real. This stuff is working here today. And I guess the third thing I'll just hint at, because I think we're still early in this, but it's one of the areas that I feel has some of the greatest potential, is we were talking earlier about just all this data, that marketing is able to collect. If you have everything integrated into a platform, awesome. It's all coming into one central system of record. But the truth is, it is a lot of data. And again, even to try and understand, okay, what are the insights I can plumb from this data, have typically required a fair amount of analytical sophistication to really dive in deep and really get the full picture of what's possible, which is great if you have a bunch of analysts sitting, right next to you, who's waiting for your every command. Most of us don't, and so I think that these Gen AI tools, they are very good at being able to synthesize the span of all the data, and then again, use those natural language interfaces to be able to answer questions and help really democratize the ability of doing deeper data analysis for anyone in the marketing org. And we're starting to see those features, emerge now. I think you give this here of the next year or so, it's going to be absolutely magical what people can do.
Incredibly cool and exciting times ahead. And I cannot thank you enough for sharing some of your insights with us today. But before I let you go, I want to further delve into the mind of the Godfather of Tech and find out a little bit more about the Godfather of Martech. And I've got to ask you if there's anything that has inspired you in written format over the years. So we've got an Amazon wish list of books that I always ask some of the great leaders that come on this podcast to share with everyone listening. So all I'm going to ask is, what book would you like to add to our bookshelf, and what is the reason behind that?
Well, if it's not already on the bookshelf, I would say if I was going to pick one book that did more to change my thinking around platform ecosystems in today's tech world, it's a book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who is also the guy who wrote like Fooled by Randomness, The Black Swan. If we talk about Black Swan, low probability events, that all came from him. And the idea of anti-fragile, just in a nutshell, is, okay, we think of fragile things that when they are subjected to shocks, they break. And then we think of robust things that when they're subjected to shocks, don't break. They're able to, withstand. But what, Nassim sort of really identified was there's actually a third thing that we didn't quite have the language for, which is things that when they're subjected to shocks, they don't just withstand the shocks, they actually get stronger. That this thing about change, actually allows certain things to evolve. In fact, evolution is kind of an example, of what could be seen as an anti-fragile process. And it's a great book in a lot of ways, but the reason I love it so is because I think when you think about that landscape of thousands of MarTech products, and you think about taking a platform ecosystem strategy, with a product like HubSpot, it's trying to tap into that dynamic of anti-fragility, which is to say, like, okay, there's all these changes that are constantly happening in marketing. And for any one piece of software, any given change might suddenly break that one piece of software. Oh, well, if this social network goes away and I had this product that was entirely focused on that social network, okay, not good, that product goes away. But if you look at it as an ecosystem with all these different, entrepreneurs and innovators, like constantly trying, these new ideas across the entire ecosystem, as changes happen, you get more and more software that's able to very rapidly emerge to be able to address those opportunities. And so the ecosystem as a whole, I think, is incredibly anti-fragile.
Wow, nobody's added that to the list before, but I'm going to add it. I'll check it out myself as well. Sounds incredibly cool. And I suspect many people listening would have heard of HubSpot, and it's got an easy-to-remember website as well, of course. But for anyone listening, maybe you want to dive a little bit deeper in some of your insights, some of the up-and-coming announcements at HubSpot, etc. Contact your team. What's the best starting point? Is there any way you'd like to point everyone listening?
Sure. Well, of course, there's HubSpot.com. If you go to ecosystem.hubspot.com, you'll be able to see the marketplace of all the different service providers and technology providers who integrate into HubSpot. And then I'll give a plug. I also write a blog, have been writing for about 15 years, called Chief Martech. And that's Chief Martech without the H at the end. Long story on that. But chiefmartech.com. And every couple of weeks or so, I usually try and share some thoughts on, just from my perspective, how I see this marketing technology industry evolving.
Fantastic. I'll add links to all of those things. Sounds like we need to get you back on to find out more about the story behind that too. But I'd love chatting with you about the importance of helping businesses scale up in the marketplace by using this variety of tools that they have at their disposal and not restricting themselves to those that may have a competitive overlap, and also how Martech has grown over the past decade, how the businesses are incorporating this into their strategies, especially with more no-code features being appearing in Martech products too. So much to talk about there. Obviously, we mentioned Gen AI, and you left us with a great book. Absolutely golden 30 minutes for me, but just thank you for sitting down and sharing that with me today.
Neil, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed chatting with you.
And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Tech Talks Daily. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Scott Brinker, Godfather of Martech from HubSpot, for joining us and sharing his expertise on the evolution and future of marketing technology. And I'll be definitely checking that book out that he mentioned. And I think if we zoom out for a moment, we delved into the intricacies of Martech in our conversation today and explored a little into how businesses can leverage a diverse toolkit to scale in the marketplace. It was also great hearing about the rise of no-code features that are empowering marketers to build digital experiences and automate processes without that long-standing heavy reliance on IT. And I think it's that, combined with the increasing integration of AI into marketing, that's leading to rapid industry changes and ultimately enhancing our customer experiences. But perhaps the most important takeaway from our discussion is the role of platform ecosystems. As Scott pointed out, without such ecosystems, integration becomes a challenge and Martech can get pretty sticky pretty quickly. And it's clear that to truly reap the benefits of Martech, businesses must create an integrated, cohesive platform ecosystem. But hey, I'm an IT guy, not a marketing guy, so over to you. Let me know your thoughts. Please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. Just look for @NeilC.Hughes. Nice and easy to find. If you want to come on here and talk about this, let me know. I'll gladly sit down with you too. So remember as well, for more insights on Scott, do check out his blog, chiefmartech.com, and HubSpot's marketplace. And stay tuned for more episodes of Tech Talks Daily, where we will dive into this fascinating world of the intersection between business, technology, and everything in between. But until then, please keep thinking about how technology might be able to better drive your business forward. But that's it for today, so thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.